Hey there everyone, welcome back to Utility Sports. We got another NBA mock draft here for the 2025 NBA draft cycle. I'm extremely excited to jump into it. I don't want to waste too much time. I hope you guys do enjoy the video today. If you do, leave a like, subscribe to the channel for more. The start of the college season has been crazy. There's been so much good basketball to watch, a lot of fun play from these prospects, both in the collegiate game and the international game. A lot of work, a lot of time's been put into this, so I hope you guys really do enjoy the amount of work I'm putting in. And let's get into the video preview here. First of all, the draft order that you're going to see in today's video is based on the standings as of Tuesday, November 12th. Now, this video is actually going to come out November 14th. It takes me a couple of days to put together my actual order, my actual composition of how I want the draft to look, how I would think the draft can really go. So I grabbed the standings, spent a couple of days going over the actual process, looking at what I think could happen, obviously spending more time reviewing film as well in the process. Orders, teams, all of this stuff is going to change, whether that be through the trade deadline and picks getting traded or teams winning more games. Right now, Philadelphia, Milwaukee, for example, have been disasters. There's been a lot of movement, a lot of shifting from what we expected before the year to where we're currently at now. And by the end of the year, things will change again. So keep that in mind as you go. This is more so meant to be about the prospects, talking about where I think they could realistically go. And then for some of the teams that have been surprisingly bad, or even in some cases surprisingly good, discussing how I could see them drafting with that in mind. And remember, we're in the early stages of the college basketball season. Things are going to change in terms of these prospects too. I'm up to date on everything that has happened so far. I cannot predict what will happen. I have, speculative reasoning on what I think could happen, but things will change. So keep that in mind as we go throughout this video. And here we are, pick number 1. The Toronto Raptors are now on the clock. And first of all, I have to hype up my boy Grady Dick. Really happy to see him playing very good basketball. The Raptors as a team, though, not so much. And I think that was pretty easy to predict this year, that the Raptors were not going to be a great team. Now, do I think they're the worst team in the NBA? Probably not. I could see them definitely winning more games throughout the course of the year than some other teams. But as of right now for this video, they are in the top spot. And you know what that means? First overall in the 2025 NBA draft, the Toronto Raptors select forward Cooper Flagg from Duke. And I am extremely impressed with Cooper Flagg. And I think there were a lot of questions for me coming into this college basketball season, not about Cooper Flagg's talent, not about his skill set, but about how Jon Scheyer and the Duke Blue Devils were going to lean into Cooper Flagg's skills. How were they going to utilize him? How much time would he spend with the basketball actually in his hands? How much decision making was going to be in his control? And so far, a lot of it has been in his control. He brings the ball up the court quite a bit. They run a lot of their offense, a lot of their half-court action through Cooper Flagg, and he has been delivering. I've been very impressed with his ability to make plays with a live dribble. He puts pressure on defenses. His overall combination of size, athleticism, and half-court offensive talent make him a very well-deserving first overall pick. And that's just on the offensive side of the ball. What really impresses me is his defensive capabilities. He's going to be one of the better defensive playmakers in the NBA, with the ability to guard out on the perimeter consistently one-on-one across the lineup. Now, the typical thing you're going to hear people throw around is, oh, can he guard 1 through 5? First of all, there's almost no players in the entire NBA that can effectively guard 1 through 5 every single given night. There are a couple of exceptions. I don't need Cooper Flagg to defend 1 through 5 consistently. What I need him to be able to do is to hedge, recover, switch out. You can match him up across the lineup. You can put him on a variety of different players on any given night. Let's say you're facing the Dallas Mavericks one night. Maybe you want to put him on Klay Thompson to start the game. But then in the second quarter, maybe you want to give Luka Doncic a different look. You can throw him on Luka for a little bit. There's the ability to utilize his length, size, and athleticism with his style of play as well. There's just a little bit of a determination and a grit that you maybe don't typically see with the first overall selection most years, where he just wants it more than the other team a lot of times. And that's honestly not great analysis, but when you're watching him play, that is something that just honestly stands out from an actual micro skill perspective. One thing that I think I just can't erase from my mind every time I watch Cooper Flagg is how elite he is with his contact balance. And what I mean by that is when he is driving with the basketball, for example, or defending on the basketball. The ability to either play through or initiate contact and remain centered, remain balanced, keeping his frame low, keeping his center of gravity balanced is extremely impressive. If you watch someone like Cooper Flagg and then you instantly go and watch someone like Noah Essengue, who we're going to talk about later in this mock draft, it is a night and day difference. The ability to play into contact, the ability to play through traffic, play around traffic. Cooper Flagg, one of the most underrated elements of his entire skill set is his ability to handle the basketball against pressure, putting the ball on the deck, playing into the teeth of the defense, and being able to stay strong, stay centered, stay balanced, and then be able to score out of those positions. And with his leaping ability especially, he's one of those huge leapers where he can just all of a sudden out of nowhere explode off the floor and play above the defense. The combination of his center of balance and the athleticism to play above defenders makes him a very unique offensive player going forward. I know there were questions about it. Can he be a number one scoring option? I don't even care about that really. Obviously, it would be great if he ends up becoming a 28, 29, 30 point per game scorer in the NBA. But what I really see for him is a perimeter version of Anthony Davis, a player who's going to average anywhere from 20 to 24, 25 points per game most seasons. Now, I know AD is above that this year, but then he's going to have tremendous impact defensively with a lot of versatility. You can apply him in a number of different ways defensively, like we talked about. I just think there's so much he can do. From a coach's perspective, you get Cooper Flagg, pretty much any flaw that you saw in your forward room, he's going to be able to address in one way or another depending on which role you want him to fill. Pick number 2, the Milwaukee Bucks here now. Like I said, not a great start to the season for Milwaukee. Obviously, no Chris Middleton so far. Damian Lillard's now been shook up with an injury too. Giannis Antetokounmpo has been playing great basketball. The question is, will he stay there in Milwaukee long term? We'll see. But with a top 4 protected pick, the Bucks, if they do keep this pick this year, that could be tremendous for their long-term future. And I think there's a lot of questions in this hypothetical situation. We're going to think about life post Giannis Antetokounmpo, okay? Which also probably means life post Damian Lillard. And I think for Milwaukee, if you're looking to kind of reset the table, start from square one after trading out Giannis and Damian Lillard, in the event that that happens, again, this is all hypothetical here at this point, the Milwaukee Bucks should be looking for an offensive engine, an offensive creator, someone who can have the basketball in their hands and thrive, succeed with it consistently. And that player for me here, second overall, is guard Dylan Harper from Rutgers. I've been extremely impressed with his early play. Now, I do have some questions we'll get to in a second, but his overall feel for the position, the ability to make reads off of a live dribble, his left-handed whip passes across the court have been very, very impressive. He weaponizes the weak side of the court as a floor general, as a decision maker with downhill pressure. Anytime he gets his feet inside the arc, inside the three-point line, that's when he becomes a real threat. Not because he's not the best shooter, which that has been a question mark so far, is what's the three-point shot going to continue to look like throughout the course of this college season. But when he gets inside the arc, he forces defense into rotations. He forces teams to kind of gravitate toward him as the ball handler. Obviously, there's so much pressure he can put on the rim. As a finisher, he has showcased the ability to finish with both his right and left hand in the half court so far, something that I do think separates him from some of the other guards at this point in time. The two-handed play as a left-handed player, but able to score to his right hand, that has been very, very impressive for me. Now, I think as the season goes on, we're going to get to see him play against better competition. We're going to get to see him play against some Big Ten schools, which will probably change how we look at him a little bit, but it's going to give us a better overall picture of who he is as a player. Now, one of my big questions for him when it comes to NBA level play is the first step. How quick is his first step? Is it quick enough to go from being like a lower S star to a capital S star? That's a really big question for me, because if he's able to consistently, like I said, get inside the arc, put pressure on defenses, force them into rotations, he has the IQ, he has the passing skills to beat team defenses consistently. The real question is how frequently, how often can he beat them at the point of attack? Does he need ball screens really, really badly to do so often? If not, you're looking at an absolute star player here in Dylan Harper. The first step's really going to be the thing I'm watching for the most over the next 15 to 20 college games that he plays in, because I think that's going to dictate how great of an NBA player he can really be on the offensive end of the floor. I've really enjoyed his defensive activity so far. He's gotten in the passing lanes a bit. He's freed himself up for some transition finishes as a result of that. And I think with his overall solid positional size and some of the shot making we've seen from him throughout his AAU days, EYBL days especially, he can knock down pull-up jump shots. So again, we're talking three-point volume. We're talking about how quick is that first step. If he really masters those two areas of his game and improves upon it and then showcases those things to me in film, I'm going to be very, very impressed with him. I have him number 2 in this mock draft, so clearly I'm already very impressed to begin with. But the first step, the three-point shooting, that will be what separates him potentially as a true star in the NBA over the next 6 to 7 years. Pick number 3, the Philadelphia 76ers with their own pick, which is top 6 protected. What a doozy for the Sixers. Joel Embiid finally returned to play against the New York Knicks. Now, the Sixers did ultimately lose that game as well, but it's very good to see Joel Embiid back. Obviously, the Sixers have been dealing with a ton of injury stuff, including the absence now of Tyrese Maxey. Paul George missed quite a few games as well. One thing I've really liked about Philadelphia is the emergence of Jared McCain over the last couple of games. I just didn't understand why he wasn't playing to start the season, especially over someone like Eric Gordon, but I'm very happy to see him now getting real run, getting some real tick each and every night for the Sixers. That'll be something that helps them going forward this season. But let's say they never really figure it out. Let's say they finish at pick number 3. Who would I have the 76ers selecting? With the 3rd overall pick in the 2025 NBA draft, the Philadelphia 76ers select forward Ace Bailey from Rutgers. And Ace Bailey is going to be a very interesting case study as well this year. So far, he's missed the early stages of the college basketball season. I'm not going to be too stressed about that. I'm not really too worried about that. What I do have some concerns about is some of his footwork and some of the technical skills of his actual game, because the shot making is there. And the reason I have these concerns is because I acknowledge he is an elite level prospect without these concerns. His ability to make tough shots is one of one in this entire draft class. His athletic profile is extremely impressive. Even at times he has flashed some real playmaking upside, throwing some real tight window passes, some high velocity passes into very, very tight windows that really impressed me in his film, especially going back to his high school days. But what I do have concerns about for Ace Bailey, just from a footwork standpoint, how often can he get to 2 feet? And when he gets to 2 feet, does he understand he has a step through he can go to? Does he understand what a reverse pivot is? How frequently can he get to those things? At times right now, it just feels a little wild watching him play. And that's okay. He's, again, a true freshman in college. I'm not expecting a perfect savant, a basketball savant here who's going to make every single thing happen perfectly. That's what Luka Doncic essentially was at his age, and that's what made Luka Doncic such a special prospect, in my opinion. Ace Bailey, there's a lot of room for him to grow as an overall player. I think he can really tighten up his handle. I think if his footwork gets better in terms of playing off of 2 feet, getting to certain spots, and really I think the biggest thing for him right now, the key word is repetition. He needs to get the practice reps. He needs to get the reps in game to not only showcase to me and to other evaluators that he's capable of being a very smooth, sound, reliable, consistent player offensively that doesn't need to rely on tough shots, but also just for his own development, getting those practice reps in to show himself and to really drill into himself the ability to do it and the consistency in doing so. Because again, with the tough shot making and the overall profile of his physical size, the strength that he plays with, even though he is very slim and wiry, I think he plays relatively strong. He's got incredibly long strides, and he's super athletic above the rim as well. He's got a lot of the characteristics of what makes up a superstar scorer in the NBA. He really does. If he's able to define his game and really flesh out some of the areas that I have concerns with, we could be talking about Ace Bailey as the best player from this NBA draft class, even with Cooper Flagg. Now, I think Flagg is a much safer selection. I think Flagg will be the first overall pick in 2025, and I think that is very well deserved. If I was picking at the top as of today, November 14th, I would pick Cooper Flagg first overall. But I do think Ace Bailey has the upward upside, the upward trajectory to blossom into one of the best players in the NBA if everything goes right. Now, I do think, again, he's going to need some firm coaching once he gets to the NBA to not only continue improving his game, but to force him into that consistency, force him into the exact regiment, the exact repetition he needs to improve his overall footwork, his overall skill set. Again, once we see him throughout this college season more, we're going to get a better idea of where he's exactly at. It's going to give us a better picture of how much work is left to be done. But as of right now, I think just with what we've seen from his high school film and some early Rutgers stuff as well that we've been able to get our eyes on, there's a lot of upside here with Ace Bailey, and I think he's going to be a player who, listen, 2 Rutgers Scarlet Knights going to the top 3, that's pretty crazy to begin with. And Ace Bailey, I think, has the upside to be one of the best scorers in the NBA in the long-term future. Pick number 4, the Washington Wizards here now, and this is where the draft starts to get a little bit more interesting because you kind of get this combination of, okay, do we draft off of production, do we draft off of upside, or is there a combination of both? And I think 4th overall, a great example here is VJ Edgecombe from Baylor. First couple games of the season, has not shot the basketball extremely well, but then his 3rd game of the year kind of turned a corner, and I expected this from him a little bit as well with how he had been playing the first couple of games. I thought he had been knocking on the door, and Baylor didn't have an easy schedule to start the season, unlike some of these other college teams. Baylor kind of got thrown into the fire a little bit with some ranked opponents, matching up against some really good teams. And VJ Edgecombe, as a true freshman, struggled a little bit from the field especially, wasn't shooting the ball very well, but was making a lot of impact plays in other ways. Was averaging 7.5 rebounds per game through the first 2 games. He was averaging 2.5 stocks per game as well. That is steals and blocks for those of you who are not familiar. And the athleticism just really pops. You think about him dunking on Coach Few's son as well against Gonzaga. VJ Edgecombe, he makes plays that other guys in this class just are not going to be capable of making from an athletic perspective. VJ Edgecombe is extremely fast. He's quick with the ball in his hands and without it. He jumps extremely well, and it allows him to play above his overall height and size. He's not a small player by any means, but he even plays bigger than he is because of those athletic traits. And I think the biggest thing that has stood out to me so far was the application of those athletic traits when he was struggling from the field. Again, the first couple of games was not shooting it well, but found himself to still be productive in a number of ways. Then the 3rd game of the season comes around, finally puts it all together, has an efficient night from the field shooting the basketball, scores a decent amount from the field. Very effective as a passer in that game, over 7 assists in that game as well. Wasn't turning over the basketball, and I think we saw everything that he's capable of becoming from an athletic standpoint, the all-around play standpoint. And I think for Washington, a team that continues to find these pieces, players with high upside. They drafted Bilal Coulibaly a couple years ago. They drafted Alex Sarr this past draft. Going in here now to draft VJ Edgecombe, put him around some of their other young guards that they just recently picked up as well, I think could be really, really incredible. This gives Washington a really interesting long-term athletic dynamic combination with Bilal Coulibaly, who with his natural size, length, and his overall development as a player over the last year and a half or so, plus Alex Sarr, who at 7'1" has been making a lot of plays off of a live dribble. Now I know he hasn't been shooting the ball super efficiently so far this season, but the defensive upside with both Coulibaly and Sarr, and now you mix in VJ Edgecombe, who could be one of the better shot blocking guards in the NBA in short order because of those athletic traits and the application of them. Washington could be a very, very scary team very quickly because of the overall length, size, athleticism that they can present across their entire lineup. And the selection of someone like VJ Edgecombe not only gives them superstar upside from an offensive standpoint if everything hits right with Edgecombe's game, but from a defensive standpoint, they just become this very unique team that's going to be a real pest to try and score on. And bringing up ball screens and off-ball actions, it's going to be hard to find advantages because Washington's going to be able to freely switch a lot of these, given the overall dynamism of their big man in Alex Sarr, the length that they have on the wings, and then also if they find someone like VJ Edgecombe, the athleticism in the backcourt and the length as well, kind of makes a unique pairing for an overall team context there for the Washington Wizards moving forward. Pick number 5, we have the Utah Jazz here now. Utah, like I had said before the season, a team that playing a lot of young guys, you're going to lose quite a few games. Now, they do have some veteran players. We'll see who does get traded, who doesn't. Colin Sexton, Jordan Clarkson, John Collins, some names to definitely watch for. Lauri Markkanen cannot be traded this year, remember, because of his extension and when it took place. But Utah is at a spot here now where a top 5 pick means everything to them. If they hit on this type of selection, it can change the overall trajectory of their organization. So 5th overall, I have the Utah Jazz selecting guard Egor Demin out of BYU. And I have been nothing short of extremely impressed with Demin's early play this year for BYU. There's just so many things I want to highlight. I think the first thing that really stands out to me watching Egor Demin is the combination of his scoring and playmaking and finding the right balance between those two things. And that's really harder than a lot of people will think it is. For someone like Demin, who can pass the ball from pretty much any single angle, has a lot of creativity and flair and flash in his pass and his passing capabilities, sometimes it can be hard for a player like that to really harness his game into, I should score here, I should pass here, because he's able to weaponize so many areas of the floor with his passing that at times we've seen players in the past, like a Ricky Rubio, for example, kind of lean into the passing a little bit more. And Rubio has shown, throughout FIBA play, especially when Spain needed him to score, he was more than capable of doing so and getting himself in spots to score the basketball. But in the NBA, that was something Rubio just never really harnessed correctly, I think. And so far for BYU, I've been very impressed with Demin's ability to look to score the basketball, pass when he should, look to score when he should. And again, that combination, I think there's just a lot of nuance to that, and I think he's done a great job handling that, especially with how much the basketball is in his hands. I've been very, very impressed with his play, with his overall size, the playmaking feel, and one thing I really need to harp on with his playmaking, it's more than just, he threw a good pass, or, he made the right decision with the ball in his hands. The passing has been electric from Egor Demin. Not only is it flashy, not only is it super fun, it's extremely functional. And what I mean by that, his passes are precise. They are accurate. He puts the basketball on the shooter. And with that, weaponizing multiple different angles, part of what makes him so unique is the sheer velocity he's able to throw some of these passes with. It limits his turnovers. It allows him to fit the ball in very, very tight windows and make passes, honestly, that when I'm watching the game from a broadcast view, I didn't even know that angle was going to be there for him to throw that pass. There's a lot of passes this year where I've just been thoroughly impressed, and even kind of revisiting film, watching games back again, watching segmented clips of him afterward as well. There's moments where he makes a pass or he makes a decision with the ball while I'm watching the defense, the team defense specifically guarding him, and I go, I didn't even think about that as an option of where he was going to pass the ball to. And that's what's really stood out to me so far. Not only has he been able to score the basketball, not only has he been able to pass the ball, but he's making really high-level reads with the ball in his hands, weaponizing all different areas of the court, and making those passes on a dime, where it's very well placed. There's a lot of velocity behind the pass, and it allows his teammates to thrive. I think around more talent in the NBA, he's going to be even better as a passer. And I think with the scoring, his reads in the pick and roll so far as a scorer have been very, very good, very impressive to me. I think one thing to watch for from a long-term, can he be a great NBA player perspective, the utilization of his left hand as a scorer. I think right now teams are going to force him hard to his left hand, and I just don't know how comfortable he is going to his left as a scorer, how dynamic he can be that way. To his right, he doesn't mind the step back and kind of reads the pick and roll a little bit more efficiently, I think, going to his right hand. So I think that'll be one of the big questions I have throughout the course of the season yet. And once he gets into some tougher competition too, BYU's had a couple of easier games to start the year. So I think once we see him against some Big 12 competition, January 4th is going to be a great example of this when he faces Houston. There's going to be so many different games. There's going to be so much more film on him against better competition that's going to give us a better real picture of who he is as a player. But right now, I am nothing short of thoroughly impressed with his play. Pick number 6, the Portland Trailblazers here now. At this spot, Portland has been a little bit of a garbage fire this year, and it starts at the top. Chauncey Billups, I'm not sure how long he's going to be the head coach there in Portland. Probably shouldn't be passed this year, to be completely honest with you. I think he's been doing a real disservice to the player development there, and we just haven't really seen Portland be able to succeed or thrive as a result of Chauncey Billups' coaching, in my opinion. But 6th overall, Portland here, who Donovan Clingan's been playing pretty well, I'd say. DeAndre Ayton's recording career lows in minutes and a whole bunch of other things this year. Portland, there's a lot of shakeup that's going to happen here, I think, not only from a coaching perspective, but from a player personnel perspective too over the next couple of years. 6th overall is a great starting point here. The Portland Trailblazers here in this mock draft select guard/wing Knueppel from Duke. And this is really, I think, the starting range for where I could see Knueppel going on draft night. He's going to be a lottery pick, almost guaranteed that at this point in time. The question is where in the lottery, and I think the top half is a very real possibility. He goes in the top half of the lottery here, 6th overall to Portland. I've been extremely impressed with his play so far for Duke as well. His shooting off of movement has been just as good as I expected it would be coming out of Wisconsin Lutheran High School, where he was a do-it-all scorer for his high school team. At Duke, the game's been a little bit easier for him because of the play off of Cooper Flagg, where Cooper Flagg's initiating action. Knueppel's scoring off of those actions where he's taking stagger screens, he's working out his Spain actions, he's getting rip screen set for him. There's so much that his shooting specifically creates. He's not going to be the best isolation player in the NBA. He's not going to be this one-on-one dominant offensive force, but what he is going to be is a very good movement shooter, and that shooting specifically is going to create other opportunities for him. Very similar to what we've been seeing from Norm Powell this year for the Clippers, where you run him off of a stagger screen. Teams are going to try and overrun that stagger screen to try and limit his three-point catch-and-shoot look. And what that in turn allows is a rip through and a baseline drive where he gets downhill and gets to the lane and finishes at the rim. Knueppel's been doing that this year for Duke. I've been extremely impressed with his play early in the season. He's been very efficient on two-pointers. He's been very efficient on three-pointers. He's been an absolute threat in transition as well. I think his shooting is an extremely safe bet for the NBA. And for a team like Portland, I still think more shooting. Put that around Denny Avdia. Put that around Scoot Henderson. Put it around Anthony Simons if he's still there. Put it around Donovan Clingan. A player like Knueppel can be extremely, extremely productive around the current existing pieces Portland has. This feels like a very good selection for them, and one that is honestly just very, very badly needed for a Trailblazers team that still is looking for some long-term direction with their overall collection of assets on their roster. Pick number 7, the New Orleans Pelicans, who have been devastated and ravaged by injuries this season. Honestly, the amount of injuries is just insane. Zion Williamson, obviously Trey Murphy, Herb Jones for a little bit, DeJounte Murray. Everybody has been getting hurt. Jose Alvarado. I mean, the Pelicans are just so unlucky, honestly, in a lot of ways, which you could say about the East as well. We talked about Philly, Milwaukee a little bit, but New Orleans especially has just been really bitten by the injury bug this year. And as a result, they might be picking in the top 10. So 7th overall here in the 2025 NBA mock draft, I have the New Orleans Pelicans selecting guard Ben Saraf from Ratiopharm Ulm. And I've been extremely impressed with Saraf for a while now. If you've been watching the channel, you know I was pretty high on him after a FIBA U18 play where he garnered MVP of the tournament and led Israel a long ways in that as well with his play, scoring over 28 points per game in that, and was really a ball-dominant lead player for Israel throughout that tournament. And that hasn't really changed since getting over to Ulm. Remember, Ulm last year produced a couple of draft picks, including Pacom Dadier, Hugo Gonzalez. Ben Saraf here has taken over the on-ball responsibility role with a lot of ball screens, a lot of working toward the middle of the floor. He's a very left-handed dominant player, so he works to his left way more frequently than to his right, but I think he does have a collection of counter moves that allow him to quickly take space to his right hand, put pressure on defense, and oftentimes he does leverage that to get back to his left hand. I would like to see him continue to grow as a scorer just simply going to his right. I think that will be an area of development for him early in his NBA career, but so far I've been higher on Ben Saraf than pretty much everybody else. I think he's a real lottery level talent in this year's draft. And like I talked about with Dylan Harper, the ability to weaponize the weak side of the floor is really what stands out to me. With Saraf, he does a very great job manipulating defenses with his eyes. He puts a lot of pressure on backline defenders, help defenders, tag defenders by utilizing his eyes to force them to make a decision defensively. If Saraf's working a middle high ball screen, he's going to use his eyes to distract the help defenders, whether that be staring down the roll man and then promptly making a pass over the top of the defense to the weak side corner, or at times staring over to the corner to kind of freeze that help defender, that tag defender, to allow the big to roll a little bit further downhill, then promptly putting the ball up in the air for them to finish on a lob. At the rim, Saraf's been very, very impressive for me from a ball handling, decision-making perspective. I know there's questions about his jump shot. I know people are going to say, talk about his left-handedness. Obviously, there are some things that he still needs to grow in. It's not like he's a surefire number 1, number 2 pick in this year's draft. But I do think overall I've been so thoroughly impressed. I think this is one of the best draft classes I've had the ability to evaluate from a ball handling, decision-making perspective. There's more guards we're going to talk about coming up here. But just starting it off with, Egor, Demin, Ben Saraf, Dylan Harper, I've been so thoroughly impressed with these guys' ability to make passes all over the court, the zip on their passes, the timeliness of their passes, and the ability to beat team defenses with their decision-making has been very, very impressive. I think Saraf here, especially for New Orleans, given the injury to DeJounte Murray and given kind of the Pelicans' long-term needs, CJ McCollum's age, I think one more ball-handling guard does make sense long-term for them. And Saraf's the guy who, with their dribble handoff system and how frequently they want to play in ball screens too, Saraf could be a very good fit in New Orleans long-term, in my opinion. Pick number 8, the Chicago Bulls here now. Man, the Bulls are an interesting team to watch. They're a lot of fun. They're playing with a ton of pace. And we've heard the Bulls specifically talk about how Josh Giddey fits the way that they want to play. The speed that they play with. And with Lonzo Ball too, they are an extremely fast-paced team. What I do think the Bulls are extremely lacking in right now, though, rim protection. I think that they need a lob threat. I think that they need more rim gravity. They need more rim. Everything needs to be centered around the rim for the Chicago Bulls right now. I think they also need more shooting, but I think at first, if you want to build a very good team in the NBA, you need to have rim pressure, you need to protect the rim on the other end of the floor, and you need to be able to dominate in the paint on both sides, and I think that's something Chicago just, quite frankly, doesn't have right now. Even with Nikola Vucevic shooting the ball well to start the season, I just feel very, very disappointed with their overall center play from an actual traditional standpoint of, can we score at the rim? Can we get to the paint and finish? Can we catch lobs and dunk it? Honestly, the Bulls just are not a super athletic team. They don't have a ton of crazy athleticism. Zach LaVine's obviously a very good athlete, but it's not like this team is blowing you away with their athleticism. So 8th overall, I have the Chicago Bulls selecting center Khaman Maluach from Duke. And I've actually spoken with someone who has spent a good deal of time with Khaman Maluach during his time with the Basketball African League. They are very, very optimistic about the long-term potential this kid has. They talked to me about how he's relatively raw, especially when they first got to know him specifically, to where he's at now, saying that there's been a ton of development, a ton of growth, that he's continuing to get better and better every single day. And honestly, you can see it when you watch Duke. The beginning of the year, some of the exhibitions specifically, Maluach was getting very, very targeted in ball screens. From a drop coverage perspective, he is still relatively raw, but it feels like each and every game his positioning is getting just a little bit better, his reactionary skills improving just a little bit, and we've seen him be very productive for the Blue Devils so far this year too, converting a lot at the rim, playing inside the system, not expanding his game too much. And I know in some ways people are going to look at that as a negative of, oh, well, he's not going to be able to step out to the three-point line. People are going to focus on the things he hasn't done or doesn't do. I want to focus on the things he does very, very well. He blocks shots emphatically. He finishes right at the rim. And I think for a team like Chicago, finding a 7'1", 7'2" big man who protects the tin, who can catch lobs above the rack, who screens and dives and rolls very, very hard, these are the things that they need around Kobe White, around Josh Giddey. And I think if they get Khaman Maluach 8th overall in the 2025 NBA draft, it's a very, very good pickup for them. And I think finally gives the Bulls some long-term direction, both defensively and offensively, around the pace that they want to play. Giving them a screen and dive big man is going to do wonders for their offense, in my opinion. And defensively, providing real rim protection around Josh Giddey, who's been a terrible rim defender so far this year as a guard, even though his elite positional size. there's been real problems for Josh Giddey, and some of that stems from his athletic disadvantages. Maluach would help erase some of that as well. So I think 8th overall for Chicago, Maluach is just a no-brainer, very good option for the Bulls at this spot in the draft. Pick number 9, the Detroit Pistons. Now, what a game against Miami, by the way. Just a stellar game, honestly. But the 9th overall pick here for the Detroit Pistons, looking to build around Cade Cunningham, looking to continue to build around Jaden Ivey. I think so far we've seen the positive impact that shooting has had. Simone Fontecchio off of Jaden Ivey drives has been very impressive to me with his relocation skills. I think Malik Beasley, the quick trigger that he's been shooting with this year. Tim Hardaway Jr., obviously, even from the first game of the season, really cemented himself as a scoring threat for Detroit, just with how quickly he's willing to shoot and catch and shoot threes. And I think for Detroit long term, if you're looking for more talent, you're looking for more skill, finding someone who has that quick trigger ability, the ability to knock down and make three-pointers, guard Trey Johnson here out of Texas does make a lot of sense. He is lighting it up right now from 3 for the Texas Longhorns. I thought about mocking him 8th overall to Chicago, but I think for Detroit, it makes a little bit more sense. Chicago's already invested so heavily in Giddey and Kobe White. Yes, the Pistons have guards in Cade Cunningham and Jaden Ivey, but I think Trey Johnson, if the Pistons are still in the lottery, does make a lot of sense for them simply because of the three-point volume. The willingness to shoot and make pull-up jump shots is very, very impressive. Trey Johnson is going to be one of the most important players and prospects in college basketball to keep our eyes on between now and March because of the overall shooting splits. Kind of reminds me last year of Jacoby Walter, how Walter started the season for Baylor, lighting the world on fire, honestly. And then from there kind of came down to earth a little bit, even went through a little bit of a cold stretch, and it really affected his draft positioning. To start the year, everyone was looking at him as an almost lock to be a lottery pick, and then he had his debut game for Baylor, and everyone was like, oh my gosh, this guy's going to be a top 10 pick. Then everything else happened. So the question for me here with Trey Johnson is, one, how much can Texas win with Trey Johnson playing this style? I don't think that's going to be a huge problem. But then secondly, how does he maintain his shooting efficiency? He's been a very good shooter for some time, even before playing college basketball. So I think Trey Johnson, I'm not pessimistic about his ability to maintain high shooting splits. The question is, at what level does he maintain them? Is he a 35% three-point shooter? Does he stay a 40+% three-point shooter? Because that difference will drastically affect his draft stock when it comes to the June draft in 2025. I'm extremely excited about his overall game, though. He's been very impressive so far. The sheer shot making has been incredible. Honestly, if you haven't watched Trey Johnson so far, you need to, because it's just, honestly, it's a really fun show. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Cam Thomas, what he's doing in Brooklyn right now, but a little bit different at the college game, obviously, just not quite the same product, but still a lot of fun to watch. And Trey Johnson at times has been lights out unconscious, especially from 3. Pick number 10, the San Antonio Spurs here. Now this pick comes from the Atlanta Hawks, and I think for San Antonio specifically with the 10th overall selection, looking for players long-term around Victor Wembanyama, around Jeremy Sohan, around their core nucleus of guys is at the forefront of discussion. And there's a guard who, before the year started, we were talking about as a potential top 3, top 4 pick in this year's draft. He has slid all the way down to pick number 10 here. But the Spurs now have another guard to put next to Stephon Castle for the long-term future. 10th overall, the San Antonio Spurs select guard Nolan Traore from France. He's been playing for Saint Quentin, and it's been an interesting beginning of the season for sure. There's been ups and there's been a lot of downs for Traore. Hasn't shot the ball particularly great, but remember, he is playing professional basketball, and this is where the contrast between someone like Traore and Egor Demin comes in. Demin's had a very soft schedule so far for BYU to start the season. Once the BYU season gets a little bit further in and BYU starts to face better teams, it's very likely Demin doesn't look as electric as he has so far, and Traore doesn't have that benefit. He didn't get to face some bad college basketball teams to start his season. Remember, he's playing against professional basketball players overseas, so there are some upward challenges that Traore's had to overcome in the process, but I think we have seen some consistent growth from him. Again, when we talk about players who can weaponize the weak side of the floor, I don't think Traore does it quite as well as Saraf or Demin or Dylan Harper, but what I do think Traore does a very good job of is fitting tight window passes into roll men, utilizing the dunker spot when it's occupied. Traore has this little niche to him about finding tight window passes and making the right pass once he draws in that help defender big. And I think with Traore's game, which is going to be a little bit more downhill-centric than Saraf, a little bit more downhill-centric than Demin, I think there's going to be that element of rim pressure that if you put Traore with a rim diving big or a lob finishing big especially, you're going to be able to make music happen just given the fact that his downhill burst, which still I think is very, very impressive, which is why I'm holding some of my stock here with him still as a top 10 pick at this point in time. I think the Spurs would be very, very happy here. Obviously, there's the French element to it as well. I'm sure Wembanyama would be happy. And I think next to Stephon Castle, who has that positional size, the flexibility to guard up and down the lineup, you could afford taking another guard here in Traore and playing with those two guards because of Castle's defensive versatility and his overall size. And then you mix in Traore's passing ability and his ability to get to the rim and finish the ball at the rack as well a bit. It makes San Antonio this dynamic team with extra ball handling, extra playmaking, extra creativity around, a stretch unicorn, big man, stretch alien in Victor Wembanyama. The Spurs could be cooking with gas. They have another pick in this year's draft as well, so stay tuned for that one if you're a Spurs fan. Pick number 11, the Charlotte Hornets here now. Like I said, suffered a loss to the Orlando Magic just recently, but I've been very, very impressed with Charlotte's play this season, especially the play of LaMelo Ball, who has been playing like one of the best ball handlers in the entire NBA. Brandon Miller's been tremendous off of screens as well. Did not shoot very well against Orlando, but for Charlotte specifically, I think there's a lot of upside here and a lot of things that I think if Charlotte had a better big man, and I think if Mark Williams was healthy, the Hornets would be a much better team presently. Having Taj Gibson as your screen and roll big man is not very conducive to winning basketball games in 2024-2025. That shouldn't be shocking to anyone. But 11th overall, I have the Charlotte Hornets here selecting wing/forward Liam McNeeley from UConn. So at this spot in the draft, I just didn't know if there was a big man that I could see Charlotte realistically taking. So instead, I have them go with Liam McNeeley here from UConn for a few different reasons. First of all, outside of his primary skills, I really like the way he's done some dirty work for UConn, specifically utilizing his size and athleticism to get on the glass. He's been doing that at a very good rate this year so far for the Huskies. And I think that's something that when you play for Dan Hurley, he's going to get the most out of you, and he's going to get you to apply yourself in a number of ways. We saw that with Stephon Castle. We saw it with Andre Jackson Jr. We saw it with Tristan Newton. We saw it with Donovan Clingan. We've seen it with pretty much every player that's played for Dan Hurley. He gets the most out of him. We've seen it with Alex Caravan. He's doing it with Liam McNeeley as well. And then the movement skills off the basketball, the cutting, the shooting, which is really his primary skill. Those things will all fit very, very well with LaMelo Ball. Giving him another sizey player with Liam McNeeley who has solid positional size, kind of reminiscent a little bit of Cam Johnson, a little reminiscent in some ways of Corey Kispert. I think McNeeley can have that kind of impact for Charlotte off the basketball as a real fit next to their other pieces. Next to Brandon Miller, it gives you another wing shooter, another forward shooter who can stretch the floor for you. Next to Mark Williams, it gives you another guy who can help you on the glass. Next to LaMelo Ball, it gives you a cutting threat. It gives you someone in transition who could be dynamic. He can space out to the three-point line and get open three-point looks in transition, or he can dive to the rim as well, finish at the rim. That's something he did relatively well at Montverde Academy a year ago too. So McNeely's just this really solid, well-rounded player, and I think for Charlotte specifically, finding a player like Liam McNeeley in the back end of the lottery I think would be a real benefit to them. Putting him next to Brandon Miller, the overall spacing construct that the Hornets could have on their team going into next season could be very, very impressive. And when you have a dynamic ball handler like LaMelo Ball who can pass and make decisions and shoot the ball the way that he can, spacing the floor around him, making the game super simple, super easy, it's going to be tough to guard, and it's going to be very effective for Charlotte long term, adding another shooter like Liam McNeeley here at pick 11. Pick number 12, the Brooklyn Nets here now at this spot. The New York Knicks. Did not expect them to be a lottery team at this point in time. Now listen, as the season goes on, they're going to win a lot more games. They're not going to be a lottery team. We already know that. But 12th overall at this spot, Brooklyn in a position to add some talent. They draft forward Will Riley from Illinois. And we talk about dynamic shot creation. Will Riley maybe has it all in this draft. He's got forward wing size, but he has the play style and skill set of a guard in a lot of ways. He's comfortable handling the basketball. He really, really loves getting to his transition pull-up threes. To begin the year for Illinois, he lit the world on fire with a 30-point bomb, honestly. He was just incredible for Illinois to start the year. He's playing next to Kasparas Yakichonis as well, a very good ball-handling, decision-making point guard, which I think has freed up Will Riley a little bit to do things off the basketball as well. And when we're talking about upside, Will Riley with the size, the skill set, the shot making, the three-point shooting, especially for Brooklyn here, a team that I think is kind of a blank slate. They've got max cap space this upcoming offseason. They've got a ton of expiring contracts. They've got Cam Thomas, who's really popped this year. Noah Clowney and Nick Claxton, two players I do like in their front court quite a bit as well. I think getting wing help and getting especially wing shooting and dynamic shooting on top of that should be one of the main goals, main priorities for the Brooklyn Nets moving forward. And I think Sean Marks would be very, very happy to draft a player like Will Riley here, who at worst case scenario can be a nice floor spacing wing for you. But if the upside really hits, he could be this dynamic shot maker to put next to Cam Thomas. And you have this, unique combination of real shot making and real upside from a shooting perspective from deep range when it comes to off the dribble looks. Pick number 13, the Miami Heat here now. This pick is lottery protected as well. This is technically owed to Oklahoma City, so a little bit of a shakeup here. You see the Miami Heat now at 13th overall in this mock draft. Again, things could change. We'll see what happens, but 13th overall I have the Miami Heat selecting guard Jalil Bathea from the University of Miami. So they actually stay right there in town for Miami, which is funny because I did not plan that. That was not intentional. But Jalil Bathea's been pretty impressive this year for me so far. The shooting splits are holding up through the first couple of games of the year. Hasn't played a ton. There was a couple of opportunities where I thought the Hurricanes would have let him play a little bit more, given the score of their games and given, the context of, hey, he's a true freshman. Let's get him some more burn. Let's get him a little bit more comfortability, put the ball in his hands a little bit more frequently. They haven't done that to a huge extent so far, but with his size, shot making, athletic traits, Jalil Bathea is still a name that I think we really need to be monitoring between now and March to maybe emerge into a top 10 pick in the 2025 NBA draft. Now, I think he still has a lot of room to grow as a player. I don't think he's into that top 10 conversation quite yet, but even going back to his high school film and EYBL film, I've been extremely impressed with Bathea's play over many years. So I think that with his scoring profile and the dynamism of his athleticism with that scoring, he could be a top 10 guy like we talked about with Trey Johnson just a minute ago, talking about how if he holds his shooting ticks, he'll be a top 10 pick. Jalil Bathea, I think, depending on how the year plays out, could definitely rise into that conversation as well, just given his overall collection of traits and skills that he can bring to the table. And I think for Miami specifically, after the Terry Rozier trade, they just need a little bit more scoring. I just, every time I watch Miami, it just feels like something's just not exactly right with them, which is weird because usually they're so well coached. Obviously, Spoelstra had that meltdown against Detroit, but just things aren't clicking right for Miami, which is weird. So I just think more talent, more skill, more on-ball talent, more perimeter talent specifically is what maybe makes up that gap a little bit. And Jalil Bathea could definitely provide that here for the Heat moving forward. Pick number 14, the Orlando Magic here now. Again, the Paulo Banchero injury really has kind of changed the beginning of their season. But it's put a little bit more of an onus on guys like Franz Wagner and Mo Wagner to provide for their team. Both of them had a tremendous game against Charlotte the other night. And I think for Orlando specifically here, looking for talent should always be the prerogative here for them. They're deep. They have a lot of young talent already. And it's an example of the rich getting richer here if they do end up with a lottery pick. I don't expect them to. I think they'll be a playoff team for sure. In the Eastern Conference, injuries have just decimated, especially the East up to this point in time. But 14th overall of the Orlando Magic selecting forward Noah Essengue from Ulm. We already talked about his teammate, Ben Saraf. Now let's focus on Essengue, who has been shooting the ball very, very well to begin the year, which is why he finds himself in the lottery at this point in time. I myself do have some long-term concerns about Noah Essengue, specifically how he's going to fit in the NBA. I talked earlier in comparison between him and Cooper Flagg, and if you watch the two of them side by side, Essengue's contact balance is horrible, and he projects to be probably a power forward in the NBA, probably playing mostly as a 4-man, maybe a little bit as a 3, maybe a little bit as a small ball center. I'm not exactly sure where he's going to slate in. It's going to depend on how his body fills out. Right now, he is very slim, very wiry, which is, fair to expect for a player his age, especially at his height and length and width. But Essengue, to me, there's a lot of off-ball skills that I do like when I watch him play. I think he spaces the floor well. I think his cutting and dynamism as a lob threat, as a wing, is going to be something that's very impressive too. We've seen Saraf and Essengue connect on multiple lob dunks this year already too. For Orlando, this is a developmental pick here. They're drafting Essengue with the idea that they don't need him to provide minutes right now. They have some bodies already laying in wait. Jett Howard, Tristan da Silva is a couple of examples of that. If Essengue hits, he could provide this extra length, size, shot blocking, defensive versatility, perimeter play to a team that is already very loaded and rich in that category. I think long-term, this could be a really huge steal if Essengue hits in the way that I think a lot of people are optimistic or hopeful that he can. For me, I do have some concerns about his overall ability with the actual basketball in his hands. How does he play through contact? How does he play through a faster, more physical NBA? Those are going to be things that are going to be challenges for him early in his career. I really do think, and I hate to say this, but I think a lot of it comes down to how his body fills out, how he progresses from a physical standpoint, because a lot of the tools are there, but right now they're tools. I don't think that they are true NBA traits. I don't think that they're true NBA skills that are going to stand out compared to other NBA players at this point in time. We'll see if the shooting maintains. If the shooting holds up into the 40, he's shooting above 40% from 3 right now, early in the season. If that holds up throughout the course of the entire year, we're going to be talking about Noah Essengue as a top 10 pick. But if that shooting split, if he doesn't shoot the ball as well as he has been so far, and again, the volume, if it's not very high volume, there's going to be questions about how he's going to fit in the NBA. And I think that there's room for him. At times people might even throw around the Giannis Antetokounmpo kind of physical profile comparison. I'm not going to buy into that. It kind of reminds me a little bit of Sekou Doumbouya in a way too, from France. There's a lot to like about Noah Essengue from an actual standpoint of how he plays without the ball, cutting and three-point shooting dynamism. If the shooting splits hold up, there is something there, and there's a real player in there. And I think if he puts on 15, 20 pounds of muscle, that contact balance problem I talked about, the ability to play around traffic, could all be pretty easily solved depending on how his body fills out. If his body doesn't fill out in a way like that, though, then you're looking at a player who maybe off the catch isn't as dynamic as we thought maybe he could be, playing off the catch. And then specifically, as a cutter, if he's cutting into a big man, he might just get stalwarted quite a bit. So there's going to be some questions there for sure about how his body develops and how he physically fills out. The skills are there. The early stages of skill development are there. There's a lot to work with. I think, honestly, potential is one of the big things with him. You're not drafting Noah Essengue to be a 30-minute per game player for you right away. You're drafting him for the long-term upside and development process. And if things hit, he could be tremendous. If things don't hit, well, you might have wasted a first-round pick. So, that's true for a lot of players. So I don't want to harp here on Essengue and say, oh, he's not a good player, this, that, or the other thing. I've seen some people put him very, very high on big boards so far. I don't search out or look for big boards, but I happen to stumble across them. And I've been pretty surprised with where I've been seeing Noah Essengue's name so far. I'm not exactly that high on him at this point in time, but we'll see exactly what happens and where he goes moving forward. Pick number 15 outside the lottery now. The Brooklyn Nets are here. I hyped up Jordi Fernandez earlier. He's been playing he's really installed a great system for Brooklyn with the ball pressure that they've been applying. I'm very excited to see how that maintains throughout the course of an 82-game season. I like their offensive style as well, the way that they're moving the basketball, relying on Cam Thomas as a scorer at the right times. I think they're picking their spots very well. I think everything has been really well coordinated. The Nets aren't the most talented team, but they're still winning some games, and I think that's a sign of good coaching. 15th overall, to help Jordi Fernandez out a little bit, I have the Brooklyn Nets here selecting forward Asa Newell from Georgia. And this is a very Sean Marks-esque pick. You think about his SEC big man. He has drafted from Georgia before, and he has found success doing it. And Asa Newell has been very, very productive so far for the Georgia Bulldogs. He's been a near double-double machine for them, putting up very efficient scoring stats. And one thing that really stands out to me every time I watch Newell play, he knows his game, he knows what he's good at, and he does those things frequently. He's dabbled a little bit with a three-point shot, but for the most part, a lot of his shots come around or at the rim. And I think leveraging his size and athletic traits is very, very important for him specifically as a power forward in the college game, sometimes playing a little bit of center. We'll see how that works in the NBA too if a team leans into him being a more of a center type player for them. I think there will be questions about rim protection if that's the case, or if they lean into him being like this power forward who's extremely athletic and very physically gifted alongside another center, and preferably if it worked out properly next to a stretch big would be great, because I think you could really leverage a lot of Newell's skills in that way. But 15th overall, I think Newell, from a production standpoint, has garnered the consideration to be a top 20 pick in this year's draft so far. He's been very impressive to me in terms of his overall impact and performance in games. And I think from a skill standpoint, there's still a lot of room for him to grow as a ball handler, a three-point shooter, if that ever is added onto his game. But for the most part, like, what I really enjoy about watching him is he knows what he's good at. He does it a lot. And, you know, that sounds super simple, but honestly, not a lot of NBA players even know what they're best at or know how to best help their team based on their skill set. And at times we see that problem play out through the course of an NBA season, whether it be in the playoffs, shot selection sometimes, right? Players who don't understand who they are compared to their peers. And I think Newell is someone who's not going to struggle with that as much as some other players do. And I think that might be a real strength of his coming into the NBA, is playing within himself, playing within a system, and being productive within those tendencies as well. Has been all very impressive for me so far. Pick 16, the San Antonio Spurs, back on the clock again. Remember, 10th overall, they were able to go with Nolan Traore, and they're going to go international here again. 16th overall, of the San Antonio Spurs selecting forward Hugo Gonzalez, a player who I think many had expected to be a top 7, top 8 pick before the season started. In Spain, hasn't been really getting the run or play time that I think a lot of people were hopeful to see him get. At times, though, when he has had that play time, he's made the most of his opportunity, has been productive. And again, this is still a skill set based decision here for San Antonio to draft. They've already selected a guard. Now they're drafting a forward with some real playmaking upside, the ability to slash, get into the paint, make decisions off of a live handle. That's one thing about the international game, especially compared to the American game. International players tend to be a little bit further ahead in terms of court mapping, court intelligence, understanding, hey, if I draw a second defender, this is the guy who's going to be open. Hugo Gonzalez has shown that a bit this year already, and I think for San Antonio specifically, with the way that Greg Popovich coaches, the way that Victor Wembanyama plays, and the way that this team is really well built with a lot of playmaking, especially if they draft Traore and Gonzalez around their core nucleus already, they're going to have this dynamic creation skill set where everyone can put the ball on the deck a bit, very similar to what OKC has done with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Jalen Williams, Chet Holmgren, for example. I think for San Antonio, continuing to index and bet on creation, ball handling, passing, court vision, and play finishing with a guy like Gonzalez as well, that just makes a lot of sense for the way that their roster is already built, the way that they're trending with like Jeremy Sohan too in that mix. I didn't mention him earlier, but should have. Devin Vassell as a play finisher is another great example. I think San Antonio just continuing to add more perimeter talent, more on-ball talent, makes all the sense in the world for a team looking to really flesh out their roster. Pick 17, the Indiana Pacers, now at this spot in the draft. They have been really hurt by injury as well, especially at the big man spot. Both Isaiah Jackson and James Wiseman down with injuries to start the year. Very, very unfortunate for both of them. I'm hoping for the best in their recoveries. But Indiana here at this point in time, center, backup center specifically, might be a big question for them. So they're going to go out and get a very big body in center Rocco Zikarsky of the Brisbane Bullets. Zikarsky, to me, there's elements to his game that I'm not in love with, but there are things that I think through real development over the next 4 or 5 years, he could really blossom into a very, very solid NBA big man in a lot of ways. First of all, he's got tremendous size, and he's going to be a good rim deterrent. He's got great length, and he has a pretty solid understanding of shot block timing and when to leave his feet, when not to leave his feet, not getting too disengaged from his own man on rolls. And there's real nuance to that. Defending in the pick and roll, playing help defense, it's not easy. Even if you're huge, having the IQ and understanding of when to jump, when not to jump, how far should you leave your man, and especially when you're matchup sitting in the dunker spot, if you leave a big man down there, it's probably a lob dunk a decent amount of the time. So I think Zikarsky has shown some real promise in those areas. Now, there are some things I don't like. I don't like his functional play strength at this point in time. I think he plays a little bit softer than maybe he even is in terms of an actual raw strength area. I think for Zikarsky specifically, he needs to continue playing into contact, he needs to focus on being stronger and playing stronger. And I know that sounds like, oh, well, you just want him to get in the weight room. Not even. I just want him to be more comfortable playing into that contact, playing into traffic, catching the ball in traffic, finishing, going right at the rim, dunking on people. I want him to be a more assertive, more aggressive version of his current self. And I think with him, instead of just soft rolling or short rolling as much on screens, I want him to decide, I'm going to get to the rim and you're not going to stop me from getting there. I think if he kind of grows and develops in that area, he could be a tremendous pick and roll pairing with Haliburton given his natural size. And I think, one thing too for Zikarsky that I need to see him develop on, and this is part of why I think him playing more assertively and more aggressively to get to the rim would help him. He doesn't have the best touch in the world as a big man either. I think, you compare him to like an Ivica Zubac or Zach Edey, Zikarsky doesn't have that kind of touch around the rim. So I think the closer he is to the rim, the better. The more dunks he can get, the better. And I think getting him just in closer proximity to the hoop is going to help that in a lot of ways. So that's really what I'm watching to see from him going forward here for the Brisbane Bullets. Pick number 18, my Dallas Mavericks here now. It's been a little bit of a rough start to the season, a couple of close losses. The Mavericks a little bit under 500 right now, but I do think Dallas overall is going to be able to figure things out as the season progresses. I'm not super worried about them. I've liked their play style so far. I've liked how everything is meshed. They've just lost a couple of close games, so I'm not hitting the panic button yet. 18th overall of the Dallas Mavericks here, selecting forward Alex Karaban from UConn. Second UConn Husky to go here in the first round, which has become a little bit of a theme. Remember last year, Donovan Clingan and Stephon Castle, both first-round picks. In this draft, Liam McNeeley and Alex Karaban, both coming out of UConn in the first round here. I think Karaban would be a perfect fit for the Dallas Mavericks. He's a very, very good shooter, very reliable shooter, probably will be near 36% from three for a majority of his NBA career if I had to bet. He's also a very intuitive cutter, and what I mean by that is he reads his defender's leverage. If his defender's up the line, on the line, he's able to back cut, he's able to find space, and he's played in a college system that requires a lot of high-level thinking, a lot of timeliness in the actions that UConn runs. Dan Hurley, again, is a mastermind, an absolute basketball genius. I think Alex Karaban and players who play under Dan Hurley typically come into the NBA with a little bit of a better mental state, a little bit of an IQ advantage over some of their peers, honestly, from a basketball standpoint. And I think Alex Karaban is a player who, as a junior right now in college, is going to be ready to not only come into the NBA, but to be an impactful winning type player. And I think Dallas would be very, very attracted by a player like this who can shoot the ball, can cut, can handle the ball just a little bit, make decisions with the ball in their hand, but then is also impactful defensively. One of the things I really love about Karaban, his defensive positioning is very, very sound, very consistently. He plays in the gaps extremely well. He's got a tremendous wingspan, near 7-foot wingspan, and he stands about 6'7". So he's got solid wing positional size, very good positional length, and he utilizes that as well as a shot blocker. Had 7 blocks in UConn's first game of the season, and then also has been impactful even throughout the course of their national championship runs as a shot blocker, as a weak side defender, a tag man. Just finds himself in the right spot a lot, and I think for a team like Dallas who has their eyes set on contention around Luka Doncic, a player like Alex Karaban, who maybe will get overlooked because he doesn't have that magical word potential hovering over him, he's just a flat out good basketball player, and I think Dallas would be very, very apt to select that type of player here to put around Klay Thompson, put around Kyrie Irving, put around Luka Doncic, put around Derek Lively. He just fleshes out their roster and gives them one more reliable rotation player to add into the mix around an already very good nucleus of pieces. Pick number 19, the Oklahoma City Thunder here now. This pick is a swap with the Los Angeles Clippers, who have been better than most expected and about as good as I expected before the season. Remember, other people were talking about the Clippers maybe sending the first overall pick to OKC. I thought that was a whole bunch of nonsense. Norman Powell's been playing out of his mind. James Harden, when you have him, you have a really reliable offensive identity. He's going to have the ball. He's going to make a lot of the right decisions. Now, I know his turnover rate's up this year a lot, but he's been making a vast majority of the decisions for the Clippers. So it's not surprising to me that the Clippers are here at a spot where they're still a pretty darn good team. And the Thunder, 19th overall, they have an opportunity to add to their talent. They're very banged up with injuries right now. 19th overall, the Oklahoma City Thunder selecting guard Kasparas Jakučionis from Illinois. And this is going to be one of the hotter topic names throughout the course of this NBA draft season. So far, I'm a little bit more gun-shy with Jakučionis than I am with some of the other guards. You might be saying, wait a minute, you were hyping up this guard class with how great of a playmaking class it is and how wonderful Demin's been doing and Dylan Harper and Ben Saraf at weaponizing the weak side of the floor. You've been saying all these things about these ball handlers, but you're a little bit lower on Jakučionis. Talk us through that. So first of all, with Jakučionis, the playmaking feel is through the roof. He is an incredible decision maker. He can pass the basketball all over the court. He is a very, very good passer, averaging over 10 assists a game right now for the Fighting Illini. So I'm not doubting the playmaking in any sense of the imagination, okay? What I am a little unsure about is the scoring gravity. Through the first 2 games for Illinois, with the ball in his hands a ton, he shot the ball 7 total times in 2 games. I'm just not sure if he has that combination. This is what I talked about with Egor Demin earlier, about the combination of looking to score and looking to facilitate. I'm just not sure if Jakučionis has that in his DNA as much, which means the potential isn't quite as high for me if the point guard who has the ball a lot isn't looking to score. It kind of feels like Ricky Rubio. It feels a little bit like Ben Simmons. I just don't know, and I don't know if you can really win a lot in the postseason with that type of player either. You know, Ben Simmons has had his fair share of playoff struggles. Ricky Rubio hasn't been a great playoff performer for most of his career when he was in the NBA. You know, it's not that Jakučionis can't be a good NBA player. I think it's very possible he can be. I'm talking about the upside, the long-term ceiling of a team that has Kasparas Jakučionis with the ball in his hands a lot. I'm just not sure what that team can look like, especially with the dynamism of most guards in the NBA right now, how a lot of them are scoring threats and playmaking threats. Even though Jakučionis might be the best passer in this draft, I'm not sure if the scoring threat is real enough to justify him being a top 17, 18, even top 19 pick, even though that's what I have him mocked here right now to Oklahoma City. Pick number 20, the Atlanta Hawks on the clock here. This pick comes from the Sacramento Kings. DeMar DeRozan's been awesome for Sacramento. Dyson Daniels been playing very well for the Atlanta Hawks as well. 20th overall, the Atlanta Hawks here select forward Mackenzie Mbako from Indiana, and I've been very, very impressed. I had him on my way too early mock draft coming into this draft cycle with the idea that he would really turn around his season going into his sophomore campaign for the Hoosiers, and he has been nothing short of impressive. Dropped a 30 bomb early in the season and has been impactful in a number of ways as well. He has a good frame to him. He was a highly touted recruit coming out of high school, and he's been rebounding the basketball, getting involved on the defensive end. He's been assisting the ball a bit this year too, a little bit more than he was last year even. I think Mbako has started to really ramp up that kind of snowball effect into him becoming a potential first-round pick in the 2025 NBA draft. Anytime you get to, pick 20 to pick 30 in this mock draft here, especially this early in the cycle, there's a lot of fluidity between, say pick 20 and pick 45, pick 50 in an NBA draft class, right? It's not like the NFL where, there's so many different positions, there's so many different caliber of players. Like pick 20 through 40, it really comes down to more of what teams need and what teams specifically like which players. But I think Mbako here does make some sense to give Atlanta a little bit more wing size. I think that's one thing that they're looking to do. Landry Field specifically is looking for players with solid frames, solid athletic traits to put around Trae Young. And as long as Mbako continues to shoot the 3-ball pretty well this year, which I think is going to be one of the big key areas to watch for moving forward for him the rest of the season for Indiana, how well does he shoot the basketball? If he shoots it well, I could see a team like Atlanta here definitely valuing him around pick number 20 on draft night. Pick number 21, the Atlanta Hawks here again. This pick comes from the Los Angeles Lakers through the New Orleans Pelicans, part of the DeJounte Murray trade. And at this spot, I have the Atlanta Hawks going with wing Alex Tui from the Sydney Kings of the NBL. So after going with Mbako, a player who has all those physical tools and traits, they go with the lesser athletic player here on the wing in Tui, who can really shoot the ball. And I think from a long-term perspective, the idea here would be to continue to implement shooting and length and size around Trae Young. We just talked about Mbako being the kind of athletic traits and the wing size and the overall athleticism that he would provide. Tui is probably one of the least athletic players we've talked about so far. Honestly, his foot speed's not great. His lateral mobility is not elite either for a first-round pick by any stretch of the imagination, but he can shoot the ball. He plays the game the right way. He moves off the ball well. He's an understanding and willing cutter. He passes the ball when he's supposed to. He can get on and off the basketball quickly. There's just a lot of off-ball characteristics that I think make him a solid fit around star talent in the NBA. Now, do I think he's a surefire first-round pick? No. I think that there's a lot of questions between now and, the NBA Combine, for example, for where we're going to see someone like Alex Tui potentially drafted. But, the NBL right now is loaded with a lot of next stars. There's a lot of players who could really pivot between, lottery to maybe outside of the lottery to end of the first round type players. And Tui's in that conversation for sure right now. Have him going 21st to Atlanta in this one. Pick number 22, the Utah Jazz here now on the clock. Remember, 5th overall, we had them select Egor Demin, someone who could be a real creator for their offense and give them some real life. Now we're going to go with a player who could be a play finisher for them in forward Colin Murray-Boyles from South Carolina. And this is one of the more polarizing players in this entire draft as well. I think a lot of people believe in CMB because of his finishing skill set, his overall collection of size and strength. He plays very, very strong. I think another good counterexample of contact balance. He's able to play with his back to the basket, but he's able to play on a downhill drive through contact. He holds his driving lanes well. Those are all things that CMB does very, very well and would fit well in a 5-out or 4-out style offense, which, majority of teams are starting to pivot toward that 5-out style with delay action. CMB could be a player who fits into that with his ability to score the basketball, especially if wings are guarding him where he's going to be stronger than a lot of the other ones. Now, the question for me is what happens if a team puts their center on him? Colin Murray-Boyles is not someone who's going to exclusively look for his three-point shot frequently. So if teams start to put their centers on him, does that kind of erase some of his impact, which is why I'm a little bit lower on CMB than others. I do think there is something to work with here with Colin Murray-Boyles from a ball handling, creativity standpoint, ability to score the basketball inside the arc, playing off of 2 feet, below the rim finishing. All of that's there. It just really comes down to me of how dynamic of an offensive player is he going to be if centers are guarding him, if other big body power forwards are guarding him. And I think, the advantages he finds in college right now might not be the same that he finds in the NBA ultimately. So that'll be a big question for me long term. But 22nd overall, I think Utah could be an interesting landing spot. Having already drafted Egor Demin, they already have Lauri Markkanen, and they have all these other, young pieces to build around too. Someone like Colin Murray-Boyles might be able to just slot in and play on day one of his NBA career, depending on where he lands. Pick number 23, the OKC Thunder on the clock again. This time this pick comes from the Houston Rockets. And with the 23rd pick, I have the Thunder selecting center Aaron Bradshaw from Ohio State University. Very, very excited about Aaron Bradshaw. I thought he was going to have a huge freshman campaign. Ultimately did not really have the impact as a freshman that I thought he was going to have. Then he transfers to Ohio State. Now we're getting a lot of Khalil Ware vibes here, where, Khalil Ware started his career at Oregon, ended up transferring into the Big Ten to play for Indiana. Aaron Bradshaw starts his career in a different conference, transfers into Ohio State in the Big Ten, and now he's being afforded opportunities to expand his game. Very similar to what Khalil Ware did, where at Indiana, Khalil Ware started shooting some threes, started posting up more frequently, started having the ball in his hands a lot more. That's been the event here with Aaron Bradshaw, where he has the ball more. He's been more of a central focal point for the Buckeyes offense. He's been shooting the 3-ball a bit. In a lot of ways, Aaron Bradshaw reminds me of Isaiah Jackson, who we've already referenced once because of his injury for the Indiana Pacers in this video. But with Isaiah Jackson, I think one thing that Jackson never really did or never had the opportunity to do was expand his game offensively a ton. He's been mostly a rim-focused big man where he's going to dive in transition, screen and roll. Bradshaw has been experimenting with stretching the floor a little bit more, but I think at the heart of his game, he's going to be best as a rim protector, rim lob finisher. I think he's got a very similar body type, physical archetype to Isaiah Jackson. And maybe even a little bit more skilled offensively than Isaiah Jackson. So 23rd overall, this is a good player, good pick. For OKC, listen, right now they're kind of decimated by injuries. Isaiah Hartenstein's out, Chet Holmgren's out, Jalen Williams, their big man, has been out. They've been really ravaged by injuries at the center spot. So this isn't really a need pick for them necessarily, but this gives them another cheap rookie scale contract to have as a backup long-term option, just providing a little bit more size. Now, it's very likely we see OKC either try and trade some of these picks back multiple years or try and pair them together to move up in the draft potentially. But if they do stay and pick, a guy like Aaron Bradshaw, 23rd overall, could make some sense from a depth perspective for the Thunder. Pick number 24, the Memphis Grizzlies here at this spot now. The Zach Edey rookie year situation has gone, I think, pretty interestingly. Obviously, people were taking their victory laps after preseason basketball games, which I've never ever seen before until a player like Zach Edey was drafted. Then all of a sudden, preseason meant everything. The regular season has been a mixed bag. A couple of very, very, very good games, a couple of very bad games, including fouling out a couple of times. It's been an interesting case study early for Memphis, but the Grizzlies overall are still a very talented team. It's not surprising that they're going to be a good team this year with Ja Morant, Desmond Bane, Jaren Jackson Jr. They just have a ton of talent, and I think to continue to build around that talent, 24th overall of the Memphis Grizzlies selecting forward Darian Reed from Alabama. One thing about Kleiman and the Grizzlies there with Taylor Jenkins, they want to have size. That's very, very clear. Everything that they do values positional size. Brandon Clark, they just have so many big bodies in there. They play Santi Aldama a ton. Brandon Clark, Zach Edey, Jaren Jackson. They just value a lot of size. And getting a 6'9", 6'10" forward like Darian Reed to play a power forward type role for them, first of all, I just think fits their team ideology a bit. And he's also been pretty productive for the Crimson Tide so far this season. I think, kind of pivoting in and out of a starting role a little bit for Alabama. His minutes aren't super consistent, but he's been relatively productive in them. I think he's playing about 18, 19 minutes per game right now at the time I'm recording this. But Darian Reed, he's been impressive, and a lot of the physical traits are there. He's been a rim finisher. He shot the three a little bit. We'll see what happens with Darian Reed the rest of the season. I think it's going to be, he's going to be one of those players, again, you get into this range of the draft where, a couple of great weeks in college basketball or a couple of bad weeks in college basketball can really impact your draft stock. I think Darian Reed's a player who we definitely need to have on our first round radar, though, and I could see a team like Memphis who values size so significantly in the draft specifically, looking at him in the back end of the first round here in 2025. Pick number 25 now, the Orlando Magic on the clock once again. Remember, they had a lottery pick earlier. Now at 25, this pick comes from the Denver Nuggets, part of the Aaron Gordon trade from a few years back. And the Magic here select guard Boogie Fland from Arkansas, with Cole Anthony having his minutes reduced this season and his role a little bit more up in the air. The development of Anthony Black into a real heavy minutes player for them, which is not surprising to me. We could see Orlando go back to the Arkansas well, but this time with a little bit of a different guard. Boogie Fland, who is a real shot-creating guard, someone who likes to shoot a ton of pull-ups. That's really at the heart of his game, a ton of pull-up shots. Now, his efficiency so far hasn't been pretty this season. Shooting under 40% from the field, I believe, at the time I'm recording this. But Boogie Fland is a player who I do think, as a highly touted recruit, a scoring guard for Coach Calipari, it's very likely that we see, Arkansas guards start to become the new Kentucky guards, right? We've talked about Kentucky guards for so long. Maybe the tide's changing to Arkansas guards now with Calipari there. Arkansas just got another big-time recruit, by the way, Malik Thomas. But Boogie Fland's a player who, for Orlando specifically here, I think could make some sense. We've already addressed a forward spot with Noah Essengue for them. Maybe a center could be in line here for Orlando too, but I thought, a dynamic shot creating guard, get him on a cheap rookie scale contract. It allows you to maybe trade Cole Anthony if they decide they want to do that. Gives the Magic a little bit more long-term flexibility with their roster while giving them a guard to have in the mix long-term. I like it for Orlando. I think at 25, it's an upside grab here. Selecting Boogie Fland at this spot, I do think makes a good deal of sense, given what Orlando already presently has on their roster and maybe what they're missing in terms of half-court shot creation. Just a little bit more of an uptick here next to guys like Jalen Suggs, Franz Wagner, Paulo Banchero, and company. Pick number 26 now, the Houston Rockets here. This pick comes from the Phoenix Suns in what is a convoluted 3-team swap, which makes me really, really annoyed every time I have to make a mock draft because I'm like, who owns what pick again? And with this selection, I have the Houston Rockets selecting guard Hunter Sallis from Wake Forest. And for Houston, first of all, there's not a lot of team needs here. So anytime I'm mocking for them, I'm going to look at players who I think could just realistically maybe slot into some rotation minutes, some spot, right? Like the Rockets over the last couple of years with Aaron Holiday. I think like Hunter Sallis could be a long-term cheap replacement for that type of role. The big question for Hunter Sallis, though, is how well does he shoot the 3-ball? First couple of years at Gonzaga, did not shoot the 3-ball well at all. Then junior season at Wake Forest, absolutely blossoms into this 40% 3-point shooter. Doesn't come out for the 2024 NBA draft. To start the year for Wake Forest through a couple of games, I think through 3 games, 1 of 11 from 3. He's shooting 9% from 3 as a senior. If that continues, Hunter Sallis will not be a first-round pick. I promise you. But in the event that maybe things kind of revert back to the way they were a year ago, remember it's very small sample size, only 3 games in so far. If Hunter Sallis starts to shoot the ball better again and kind of returns back to form of what he was last year, he definitely warrants a back end of the first round or maybe early second round pick, which is why I could see a team like Houston here drafting him to be a serviceable, cheap, long-term backup guard option behind their current collection of pieces. They do have Reed Shepard, they have Amin Thompson, Fred VanVleet, Jalen Green. It's not like they need a lot of minutes from the guard spots here. So you're really looking at a depth pickup here for Houston, and a guy like Hunter Sallis I could see fitting in. I don't really think that they need to draft a forward. Maybe they could look at a center too. Steven Adams is an expiring contract, so there's a couple of different options here for Houston, but I think Hunter Sallis, out of all the other players available at this spot in time, has a lot of real positives that I could see making him stick in the NBA, especially if the 3-point shot reverts back to what we saw a year ago. Pick number 27, the Golden State Warriors on the clock now. What a start to the season for Golden State, by the way. They've just been so thoroughly impressive, winning a bunch of close games, winning some games big as well. Buddy Hield's been a real revelation for them. Not really surprised by that. If you've been watching the channel for a while now, you know I've been a big Buddy Hield supporter for quite some time. I think there's just so much functionality he provides. Steph Curry's a great player. Draymond Green's back to Defensive Player of the Year form almost. Golden State's been very, very good and very fun to watch. They're going to add to their talent here with guard/wing Dink Pate from the G League. Former G League Ignite product, right, was not allowed to enter the 2024 draft because of the age restriction. So with the G League Ignite program shut down, his future was in a little bit of question. Is ultimately staying in the G League, playing for a G League team, was part of the G League draft. Dink Pate, for me, there's a few things I really like that I want to highlight why I think he could be an interesting fit here for Golden State. Kind of takes me back to the Sean Livingston era. Dink Pate's best offensive skill set is his pull-up mid-range jump shot. And I'm sure fans of all 29 other teams just got shivers right now, because if you remember watching Sean Livingston for the Golden State Warriors, they'd be on like a 17-2 run. They'd be down by like 18 points. They'd go on a 17-2 run or something, get it like really close. The game gets maybe to a 1-point, 2-point game. And all of a sudden, Sean Livingston comes down and shoots a 19 seconds left on the shot clock, 20-foot pull-up jump shot, and it's nothing but net. And it's just like, those were the most devastating shots of that Golden State Warriors era of basketball, because, Steph, you knew he was going to make threes, you knew Clay would make threes, Draymond would, do Draymond things, you get a lob dunk to, Andrew Bogut or something, right? Like, the Warriors had their style. And then they had the one guy who was like off the style. And those would be the ones that felt like daggers, because it'd be like, oh, thank God, Steph Curry didn't shoot a 3, Klay Thompson didn't shoot. Oh my gosh, Sean Livingston made a jump shot. It just like every time, it just like felt like you were getting stabbed in the heart. And I feel like Dink Pate could kind of bring that kind of off schedule, out of their rhythm kind of flow back to Golden State in a positive way, because he's able to handle the ball. He playmakes quite a bit. He's a guy that you could have the ball in his hands, let him get to his strength, which is again that mid-range pull-up jump shot, without completely hurting your overall team flow. And that's something comparing Sean Livingston to Jordan Poole couldn't play his style without hurting the overall team flow. Sean Livingston got to his style very quickly, very effectively, and he did so without hurting the flow of the Golden State Warriors. And I think that's something Dink Pate might be able to do as well in a Steve Kerr offense, which makes him a unique fit here, 27th overall for Golden State. Pick 28, the Los Angeles Clippers here now via swap with the Thunder. They find themselves now picking 28th overall. This is a really important pick for the Clippers. And every time I watch the Clippers play this year, I almost pull my eyes out when James Harden goes to the bench and number 77 checks into the game. He is one of the 5 worst players in the NBA right now. Very, very pointedly. So for the Clippers to improve, they need another half-court creator for their offense. And you might say, well, how do you get one of those at pick number 28? Well, you draft someone who's small and overlooked because he's small. And that player is guard Mark Sears here from Alabama, one of the best players in all of college basketball right now. He should be a first-round pick. He's very good at basketball. Very point-blank, very simple. I know he's small. I know he has some limitations. I know the potential is not going to be through the roof. He's good at basketball. He can dribble, he can pass, he can shoot. Those things are very, very valuable on a basketball court. And for the Clippers, who really badly need someone to be able to handle the offense and be able to run a team when James Harden is on the bench, not only this year, but also going into future seasons, Mark Sears is their best chance at that here. Getting him 28th overall gives them a little bit of life off the bench, and something that I think they really badly need. They need someone who wants the basketball. They need someone they can trust with the basketball. They need someone who doesn't just handle the basketball to handle it. They need someone who's very functional and very decisive with his handle. And that's exactly what Mark Sears is. A far better player than Kevin Porter Jr. He would be a significant upgrade onto the Clippers roster long term and would really help them with their second unit when James Harden is off the floor. Now, I do think the Clippers, once Kawhi Leonard is healthy, naturally their second unit is going to play better because one of Kawhi or Harden will always be on the floor. But looking forward, needing a guard behind Harden for the future anyway, Mark Sears I still think makes a lot of sense going forward in that direction to begin with. Pick number 29, the Boston Celtics here now at this spot in the draft. We know it's about three-point shots, right? Joe Mazzulla is one of those masterminds who just knows how to generate and create open looks. So let's play into that identity a little bit. I really like their Baylor Shireman pick last year. I think once he gets his opportunity in the NBA, he's going to be able to stick and stand out for a while. 29th overall, the Boston Celtics here select guard/wing Kobe Brea from Kentucky. And as a Dayton Flyers fan myself, I can tell you I was absolutely devastated when Kobe Brea transferred away from my Dayton Flyers, but it's been a huge home run for him. He got to Kentucky. He's been able to showcase his skill set, his talent playing for Mark Pope, and he's an absolute flamethrower from behind the three-point line. Last year had really great synergy and chemistry with Day'Ron Holmes II, who was a first-round pick by the Denver Nuggets. Unfortunately tore his Achilles, but Kobe Brea was awesome next to Day'Ron Holmes, working off of handoffs. He's got real deep range. I'm talking many feet behind the NBA three-point line. He's going to be comfortable catching and shooting from deep, and he has a lot of history and a lot of success throughout his college career shooting off of movement, whether that be pin down, stagger, Spain action. He's done it all. He's worked off of handoffs. He's done everything when it comes to shooting and making three-point shots. He's very, very good at it. So this is one where people are going to probably overlook Kobe Brea from an upside standpoint. They're going to overlook him for a lot of things. He's got one really elite functional skill in the NBA, and that's shooting the darn basketball. And that's what the Boston Celtics want to do more than anybody to begin with. I do think Kobe Brea does make some sense as a second round option for a lot of teams, or a very late first round option for a team like Boston who wants to shoot so many threes a game. Kobe Brea could fit right into that team identity. Pick number 30, the Utah Jazz on the clock once again with their third first-round pick in the 2025 NBA Draft. This one comes from the Cleveland Cavaliers. 30th overall, the Utah Jazz select forward Andrei Stojakovic from Cal, son of Peja Stojakovic, former NBA great, had a lot of great years with the Kings, obviously won a championship as well with the Dallas Mavericks in 2011. Now Andrei Stojakovic, his son, after transferring from Stanford as a freshman, did not have a great season for the Stanford Cardinal, finds himself in California taking over that role that Jalen Tyson had, which ultimately got him drafted in the first round. And I think Andrei Stojakovic, listen, he hasn't shot the ball very well at all to start the season. His field goal percentage, his three-point percentage, both of them are very low. His true shooting percentage is in the mud right now. But everything else is very, very good. His points per game average, the volume's there, the rebounds, the assists, the stocks are there. He's been impactful in a lot of ways for California, and he hasn't shot the ball well, and he's still been scoring the ball at a pretty good clip this season. So you have to figure if his shooting splits trend upward, which I expect them to do. I think he's a good natural shooter. I've watched him shoot a lot throughout his career. I've watched a lot of clips of him. I've seen workouts of him. He is a NBA caliber player, in my opinion. So I think as the season progresses, he's going to be a name we start to hear more and more and more of. And I want you to remember me as the person who first started putting you on to him. I had him in mock drafts last year a little bit. Obviously didn't have the season, so I had to pull him out of my mock drafts. But then going into this year, I had him in my way too early mock draft as a guy to watch for again. And I talked about him taking over this Jalen Tyson role. That's exactly what he's doing for California right now. Watch for Andre Stojakovic. I have him 30th overall in this mock draft, but could see him really rising depending on how the next couple of weeks go for his season. I'm very, very optimistic that that shot's going to start falling and his efficiency is going to skyrocket here. So we'll see what happens. But Utah gets another wing here capable of shooting and playing off the catch. I would be very, very excited about Utah if I was a Jazz fan myself. Hopefully you guys did enjoy the video. If you did, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel for more. Again, a lot of work, a lot of time goes into these videos. Really do appreciate you guys for taking your time to watch them. Let me know down in the comment section below who your favorite team is and who you want your team to pick in the 2025 NBA draft. Thanks again so much, and we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.